On December 16, 1944, the sky over the Ardennes was gray and heavy, with a drizzle mixed with light snow falling over the silent forests. Outside, the narrow, winding roads through the snow-covered hills were almost indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. The winter air was biting cold, with gusts of wind weaving through the trees, drowning out every sound, making the place feel trapped in a quiet, terrifying world. But that quiet was only on the surface. Inside the American command posts, fear and tension hung thick. The Germans, hardly anyone believed they still had the strength, suddenly launched a massive offensive along the Ardennes line, an area most Allied commanders had considered so secure it was almost impossible to attack. American forces there were thinly spread, just 4 divisions holding a broad front across forested hills and icy valleys. Against this backdrop, in Verdun, inside a building that had once served as an old French barracks, the atmosphere was just as taut. A long room was used as a meeting space for Allied generals. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the bitter smell of coffee, mingling with a more unpleasant odor, fear and tension. On the long table, maps were spread out, red and blue arrows marking the Ardennes like deep wounds on the body of the Allied forces. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, stood at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the map. Around him, other generals, Omar Bradley, corps commanders, and staff officers sat in silence, chewing pencils or jotting notes. No one laughed, no one spoke. Not a single glance escaped the weight of tension. They all knew that just a few days earlier, more than 200,000 German troops had poured into the Ardennes, sudden and violent. Eisenhower raised his head, his voice cut through the heavy silence like a knife. "How long before we can strike north to relieve Bastogne?" A simple question, yet carrying the weight of an entire war. The generals remained silent, eyes glued to the map, calculating numbers, distances, fuel, ammunition, road conditions, and weather. They had to imagine pulling units from ongoing battles, turning an entire army 90 degrees, moving across narrow icy roads, and charging into an enemy's prepared defenses, all within a matter of days. Everyone knew it was nearly impossible. The meeting room seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Each tick of the clock echoed like a heartbeat, reminding everyone of the urgency. Officers calculated, took notes, tore up old sheets, and started over. No one wanted to be the first to answer, because any answer carried a deadly risk. If wrong, Bastogne would fall, supply lines cut, and the worst-case scenario could unfold. The Germans gaining a crucial gateway to the North Sea, splitting the Allied forces and destroying the entire plan for the invasion of Germany. In that tense atmosphere, George S. Patton, the commander of the U.S. Third Army, sat calm and composed. His face was stern, eyes fixed on the map as if he had already foreseen every possibility. Then he spoke, his voice firm. "I can attack with 2 divisions in 48 hours. The answer rang out across the room, startling everyone. Some officers thought he was joking or boasting, as he often did, for Patton's reputation was that of a daring, decisive man. But the atmosphere left no room for doubt or skepticism. 2 divisions in 48 hours. That meant pulling units from other battlefields, reorganizing forces, moving more than 100,000 men and thousands of vehicles, and striking an enemy already prepared for defense. It sounded like an impossible task, even insane. Yet Patton did not waver. He did not boast. He did not joke. He simply spoke what he knew could be done. 10 days earlier, Patton had received a warning from intelligence officer Oscar Caul. German divisions were moving, not to defend, but to attack the Ardennes. The intelligence reports had been downplayed by higher command, but Patton trusted Caul's analysis. From that moment, he began planning an unprecedented rapid maneuver. And now, as the tense meeting waited for answers, Patton was ready. In his mind, Bastogne was not a surprise. It was a situation he had anticipated, a test of the Third Army's capability that he had complete confidence in. In Verdun, the other generals were still weighing options, calculating every number, every distance, every risk. While they had not yet grasped the full scale of the crisis, Patton already had an answer, a plan, and readiness to act. Not by luck, not by recklessness, but because he had prepared, predicted, and trusted his meticulous planning. Even as the most experienced generals in the U.S. Army remained bewildered, Patton had laid the foundation for a campaign that would later become a symbol of speed, preparation, and strategic foresight in World War II. Bastogne was about to be surrounded, but Patton, the only man in that room, was ready to face the storm others had not yet even seen. While the other Allied generals were still stuck over the map, weighing every number, every stretch of icy road, George S. Patton maintained an unusual calm. Unlike the others, he was not overwhelmed by the dry calculations and cautious assumptions. He knew one thing: time waits for no one, and in war, hesitation can mean mass death. Patton did not speak much. He simply studied the map, tracing every road, every village, every hill in the Ardennes, a forest most commanders considered dangerous but no one dares attack in winter. For Patton, this was not a reason for fear, but an opportunity to prove that a meticulously prepared plan could overcome any obstacle, even those that seemed impossible. Patton's words in the meeting left many generals stunned. "I can attack with 2 divisions in 48 hours. They looked at him as if they had just heard an absurd tale. 2 divisions, not many, yet required to move over 100,000 men and thousands of vehicles across snow-covered roads, withdraw from current battlefields, reorganize, and strike into enemy-prepared defenses. It was a calculation that would make any strategist shudder. But Patton did not flinch. He knew that what he said was not boastful, but true. A truth he had prepared for 11 days earlier, when his intelligence officer, Oscar Caul, had entered the room with a pile of documents, maps, and decrypted information. Caul was meticulous, careful, and extremely thorough in analysis. He was not the type to boast or exaggerate, but his eyes that day held urgency. Caul had been tracking German units along the Ardennes and noticed something alarming. 15 German divisions had disappeared from the defensive lines. These were not depleted units. They were fully equipped, including panzer divisions, with hundreds of tanks. Even more surprisingly, no higher-level intelligence agency seemed to notice. The superficial explanation offered was that these divisions were being held as reserves, ready to respond if the Allies broke through. But Caul realized this was not defensive reserve, it was preparation for a massive attack. A series of other signs reinforced this conclusion: unusual radio traffic, prisoners revealing new units, locals reporting nighttime convoys, the sound of tanks moving through the forest. Every small piece of information combined to form a terrifying picture. The Ardennes was about to become the focal point of a large-scale assault. Caul reported back to Patton, face stern, eyes never leaving the map. He knew that ignoring this warning would spell disaster. But he did not just listen, he acted. Immediately, he ordered his staff and officers to prepare detailed contingency plans. These were not half-baked plans or assumptions. Every road, every assembly point, every logistics step, every deployment timing was carefully calculated. He outlined 3 scenarios. If the enemy attacked from one direction, the Third Army would execute Plan A. If the situation was different, Plan B. If the unexpected occurred, Plan C. All included detailed instructions for moving troops, vehicles, supplies, communication, and handling chaos on the battlefield. Officers could not help but doubt. Some wondered, why bother preparing for a distant scenario when we are currently advancing and winning? But Patton had demonstrated that in war, preparation was more important than any temporary victory. He trusted Caul's assessment, trusted the Third Army's capabilities, and believed that while others were still fumbling, only he could turn numbers and maps into life-saving action. While the other generals continued to analyze, deliberate, and sometimes argue over how to respond, Patton quietly began implementing his plan. The Third Army was not only ordered to be ready to withdraw, but also to redeploy northward with the goal of relieving Bastogne and preventing the enemy from splitting Allied forces. What lay outside the meeting room was chaos and danger. Inside Patton's room was meticulous preparation, every detail calculated like a perfectly tuned machine. And it was this preparation that would make the Third Army the only force on the Western Front capable of reacting immediately when the German storm struck. On December 9, 1944, 10 days before the Ardennes storm struck, everything seemed normal at the U.S. Third Army headquarters in eastern France. Patton's units were still advancing into Germany, expanding control, and planning to occupy additional areas along the Saar River. Everyone believed the German army was exhausted, that Allied victory was near. On paper and in reports, Germany seemed to be faltering step by step, and many senior commanders thought World War II in Europe was almost over. But Oscar Caul, Patton's intelligence officer, saw a very different picture. Caul was meticulous, neither dreamy nor boastful. He had spent months analyzing intelligence reports, tracking every German movement, and noting every unusual sign. That day, he entered Patton's office carrying a bundle of files, maps, and decrypted radio reports. His expression was serious, radiating urgency. "Sir, we have a major problem." Caul explained that over the past few weeks, 15 German divisions had disappeared from defensive positions the Allies were monitoring. These were not depleted or battered units. They were full-strength forces, including powerful panzer divisions with hundreds of tanks and mechanized equipment. Allied high-level intelligence agencies had noticed this disappearance, but most assumed these were reserve forces, held back to respond if the Allies broke through. They ignored the warning, believing Germany lacked the strength to attack. But Caul, having observed German activity for months, realized this was not defense, it was a falling hammer waiting for the right moment. Other signs reinforced his prediction. A sudden spike in unusual radio traffic, prisoners reporting new units, locals hearing tanks moving at night, supply convoys appearing along remote roads. Every small detail was a piece of a larger picture. Caul pointed to the Ardennes on the map and told Patton, "They will attack through this forest. If Bastogne falls, they could split the entire Allied defense line, threatening Antwerp, our supply network, and our strategic position." Patton listened in silence, his face stern and eyes cold. He understood the danger, but instead of panicking, he focused on solutions. What Caul presented was not a vague prediction, it was an assessment based on careful analysis, real data, and battlefield experience. This was an opportunity to act before everything descended into chaos. Immediately, Patton called his direct superior, General Omar Bradley, to relay Caul's information. 15 German divisions had disappeared, suspicious movements were observed, and the American defensive line in the Ardennes was thin. Bradley listened but was not fully convinced. In his view, Germany was exhausted, and reports of new forces were merely defensive reserves. He advised Patton not to worry too much, since the war was almost over. Patton put down the receiver, remained silent for a moment, then looked at Caul. A long pause passed between the two men, both knowing that the decision to come would be life or death. Finally, Patton spoke simply but decisively. "Start planning now." From that moment, even while Third Army units continued their advance in the south, a secret team began working quietly. Officers, led by Caul, developed 3 detailed scenarios for rapid northward deployment. Plan A: if the enemy attacked from the exact direction Caul predicted, the Third Army would follow this route, with specific assembly points and hour-by-hour movement schedules. Plan B: if the enemy chose a different direction, an alternate route and maneuver plan was ready. Plan C: if unexpected developments occurred, units would be reorganized immediately, with supply lines, communications, and medical support prearranged. Every detail, from route selection, tank placement, troop rest stops, to the supply of ammunition, fuel, and food was calculated. They planned as if assembling a perfectly functioning war machine, ready to operate as soon as the order was given. Even Patton's senior officers were confused. Some thought he had gone too far. Why worry about a scenario that hasn't happened yet, while we are still winning elsewhere? But Patton had proven, in war, foresight and meticulous preparation were the difference between survival and disaster. He trusted Caul and the capabilities of the Third Army. Thanks to this careful preparation, when the Germans attacked the Ardennes on December 16th, the Third Army would be the only force capable of rapid maneuver, redeployment, and timely counterattack. What seemed like a miracle to outsiders was actually the result of foresight, accurate intelligence analysis, and decisive action taken 11 days earlier. Immediately after Patton correctly assessed the danger from the Ardennes, the Third Army began operating like a secret machine, preparing for a maneuver that most other Allied forces had not even considered. This was not a general plan, but a sequence of detailed actions mapped out to the hour, the road, and the assembly point. Patton wanted no risk in the coming days. He understood that preparation was survival. Staff officers, under Oscar Caul's guidance, developed 3 contingency scenarios, each so precise it was almost unbelievable. Everything, from supply lines, communications, troop movements, tanks, artillery, to support units, was scheduled with exact timing. If the enemy attacked from this direction, Plan A would be executed. If the situation changed, Plan B or C would be applied. Each plan not only mapped the advance route, but also included supply stations, assembly points, unloading and redeployment routes, fuel reserves, and the location of each division along the way. In the following days, the Third Army continued fighting in the south, but quietly, another force was being prepared for an urgent mission: withdraw from the current battlefield, turn the entire formation 90 degrees, and advance toward the Ardennes. It was an extremely meticulous and tense operation. Winter roads were slippery, weather conditions harsh, and the Germans could attack at any moment. But every detail, every vehicle, every soldier had a specific position, time, and task. Patton did not explain the reasons to most of his officers. He simply said, "Prepare to withdraw and be ready to move north as soon as ordered." A few frowned, not understanding why they needed to worry about a threat that seemingly did not exist, but they knew one thing: orders from Patton were never a game. He trusted Caul's intelligence, trusted the Third Army's capability, and believed that meticulous preparation would save thousands of lives. During those days, officers and soldiers carried out redeployment exercises, plotting routes, checking vehicles, organizing supplies, coordinating traffic, and preparing artillery and tanks. Every detail was calculated to the second. Engineer teams cleared roads. Traffic officers set up checkpoints to ensure vehicle flow was uninterrupted. Every small decision was carefully considered, because a single mistake could ruin the entire plan. Outside, other generals focused on their own campaigns, many unaware of the threat approaching the Ardennes. No one suspected that the Third Army was preparing a historic maneuver, a move that could change the entire battle. Meanwhile, Patton and Caul worked quietly, dedicating all their time, energy, and resources to a plan only they knew was essential. Thanks to this preparation, when the Germans launched their attack on December 16th, the Third Army was ready immediately. Not through luck, not through recklessness, but because of the days of silent planning beforehand. Roads, assembly points, supply stations, reserve units, all were perfectly prepared. When the German storm arrived, while other forces were still confused, the Third Army moved like a well-oiled machine. There was no hesitation, no guessing. Every division, tank, and soldier knew their mission, position, and timing. Mechanized units, artillery, supply trucks, and ambulances moved in perfect synchronization, as if they had trained for weeks. In the winter darkness and bitter cold, this meticulous preparation became the key to survival. Patton did not just save the Third Army from chaos, he prepared to save Bastogne, to rescue thousands of American soldiers under siege, and to prevent a strategic disaster that could have altered the entire course of the war. On December 16, 1944, as the winter sun still slept behind gray clouds, the German storm struck the Ardennes. Along the thin American defensive line, artillery exploded, smoke filled the air, and soldiers barely had time to grasp what was happening before German divisions surged forward. Thousands of shells rained down, communications were cut, and chaos spread. Newly deployed units, such as the 106th Infantry Division, were crushed. Two of their battalions surrounded and forced to surrender. This was the first time in the European theater of the war that such a large number of American troops had been captured. But at Third Army headquarters, Patton was not surprised. When the first reports of the Ardennes attack arrived, he simply looked at Caul and said calmly, "You were right. Their target is Bastogne." Without further explanation, Patton was ready for the next step, activating contingency plans. Immediately, the Third Army began a lightning-fast maneuver. Units in the south started withdrawing from their current positions, turning the entire formation northward. Hundreds of tanks, pickups, trucks, artillery, and mechanized equipment moved along narrow, icy roads in snow and freezing conditions. Traffic became an art. The military police had to coordinate carefully to avoid bottlenecks, but thanks to pre-planned routes, assembly points, and procedures, everything went almost flawlessly. In less than 48 hours, the 4th Armored Division led a maneuver of more than 100 miles toward Bastogne. Following them were the 26th Infantry Division and other supporting forces. Over 133,000 vehicles, from tanks to supply trucks and ambulances, were deployed in perfect synchronization. Every hour, every minute was meticulously calculated. Every soldier knew their position and mission. While other Allied forces remained confused, the Third Army had become a perfectly functioning war machine. On December 22nd, the vanguard units of the 4th Armored Division engaged and broke through German defensive positions near Ossonville. They linked up with the 101st Airborne Division, which had been besieged in Bastogne for 8 days, enduring constant artillery bombardment with limited food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The first sight of the link-up, American tanks meeting paratroopers on the road, was a vivid symbol of preparation, decisiveness, and timely action. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st, became famous for his response to the German demand for surrender, a single word, nuts. It was not only a display of resolute spirit, but also a reflection of faith in the relief coming from Patton. The surrounded soldiers did not know the details of the Third Army's plan, but they trusted that reinforcements would arrive, and that trust kept them alive. After linking up, the Third Army expanded the relief corridor, delivering ammunition, food, supplies, and medical aid. German forces attempted to strike the flanks of the corridor, but Patton's meticulous preparation allowed American troops to hold the line. Bastogne was saved, and the German plan was thwarted. This counteroffensive did not merely save a small town in the Ardennes, it destroyed Germany's strategic plan. They no longer had the ability to split Allied forces or capture Antwerp. While the Battle of the Bulge continued into January, Patton's 11 days of prior preparation had already shifted the balance. When casualty reports were tallied, over 19,000 killed, more than 47,000 wounded, and approximately 23,000 captured or missing. These staggering numbers made the battle one of the bloodiest in U.S. military history. Had Bastogne fallen, the numbers would have been even higher, and the course of European history could have taken a very different turn. After the campaign, official histories praised the courage of the soldiers, firepower, and leadership determination. But the silent preparation 11 days earlier, the work of Oscar Caul, Patton's foresight and decisiveness, was often only a footnote in the record. It was a lesson in the value of intelligence, preparation, and the ability to act before disaster strikes. The victory at Bastogne was not just a story of bravery or luck, it was proof of a reality. In war, foresight, planning, and meticulous preparation can mean the difference between life and death. Patton, with absolute trust in Caul's intelligence, turned predictions into action, saved thousands of lives, and defeated Germany's last major offensive in Western Europe. And that is why George C. Patton was the only one truly ready when the Ardennes storm hit, not because of luck, not because of recklessness, but because of preparation, vision, and faith in the truth, even when the world doubted.